Thank you all for being here tonight. Thanks to all the committee members who are here. I'm so happy to see all of you. And to all the visitors who are here tonight, welcome. We're happy to have you. And in case you're curious, this is exactly how every Harvard student spends a Friday evening. We're here tonight to celebrate courage and young leadership, to embrace our responsibility to meet challenges of today and tomorrow, and to inspire and to honor inspiring individuals who remind us how much we can do even when the odds seem stacked against us. This award is named after the campaign platform of the youngest man ever elected president. A president who represented a new generation, one that was tired of listening to an old one. I wonder what that's like. The new frontier, as President Kennedy said, was not a set of promises, but a set of challenges. Not what he would offer the American people as president, but what he would ask of them. The new frontier may be part of a distant era, but it represents a common thread in our history. And that is the power and wisdom and ability of young people to lead, to bring about change and progress. Mayor Michael Tubbs is continuing that tradition today and giving young people everywhere a good name. Born in Stockton, he grew up without many of the advantages or opportunities that others are lucky enough to enjoy. But nonetheless, he distinguished himself at an early age, winning essay contests, debate contests in high school, where he wrote about the challenges he faced as a kid and argued in support of universal health care. His winning streak continued after high school when, as an undergrad at Stanford, he won a competitive scholarship, served as president of the NAACP chapter, and interned at the White House. More winning for Michael Tubbs in 2012 when he ran for Stockton City Council and unseated an incumbent with 60% of the vote. At 22 years old at the time, he became the youngest council member in Stockton's history and one of the youngest in the country. There, he co-founded a civic partnership to combat poverty. And as chair of the audit committee, he helped turn things around after Stockton entered bankruptcy in 2012. Not yet tired of winning, in 2016, Michael was elected mayor, receiving 70% of the vote and President Obama's endorsement. At 26, he was the youngest ever to hold that office and the first African-American mayor in the city's history. And as mayor, he has already accomplished a great deal. He secured over $20 million to launch Stockton Scholars, a scholarship program which intends to dramatically increase the number of students that attend college. He has focused on violence prevention and brought programs to the city to aid in that effort. And he has launched a universal basic income pilot program, which sends out $500 checks to 100 city residents every month. Doing the hard work of running a city, Mayor Tubbs provides us with an example of bold, ambitious leadership from a young person, and I'm honored to present him with the 2019 New Frontier Award. Please welcome him and my mother to the stage for a lovely photo.
Well, thank you so much for that far too kind introduction. The only thing I would add in terms of winning is that in 2016, I also proposed to my wife, Anna, who's here today, and that's the ultimate. It's funny being back at Harvard because I'm always often reminded by my best friend, Lang Luntell, that I was waitlisted here. In fact, last time I was here, I was speaking to some students, and one raised his hand and said, "Mayor Tubbs, I wrote about you in my Common App essay." And I looked at him and I said, "And you got in?" I wrote about myself and it didn't end up quite as well. But thank you so much to the JFK Library, the New Frontier Award Committee, and to you all for being here tonight. I'll be brief, but I want to center my remarks on my favorite poem. It's a poem I discovered in 7th grade from the illustrious scholar Tupac Shakur. And it goes like this. Did you hear about the rose that grew from the crack in the concrete? Proving nature's laws wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but like keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from the crack in the concrete when no one else ever cared. And growing up, that poem provided a lot of solace and hope. I'm growing up in a community like Stockton, in poverty, with a father who's still incarcerated, with a mother who had me in high school. There were all types of challenges, and the idea was to be that rose, to be the one that grew from concrete. And after the murder of my cousin in 2010, I decided to go back to Stockton and run for city council with this idea that it was my job to use the resources and tools and privileges I had gained to grow more roses from concrete. But now as mayor, I am resolute, and I think President Kennedy spoke of this when he talked about the new frontier, that it's not enough to grow roses from concrete. That the new frontier is really about changing that paradigm and challenging why roses should have to grow from concrete in the first place. Because as you know, it's unnatural for roses to grow from concrete. It's celebrated, it's rewarded, and it's novel because it's not supposed to happen. And as a policymaker now, and through research and studies and learning, I'm realizing that a lot of things we see in our world, in our country today, aren't acts of God, but they're acts of men and women, which makes me excited because that means we have the power and the agency to change it. When I think about a new frontier, I think about the fact that it's not just for the young, although the revolution, as some Black Panthers said, are always in the hands of the young, but it's not just for young, it's for all of us who believe that our country could be even better. When I think of the new frontier, I think President Kennedy gave words to that idea, but it's something as old as America itself. Since 400 years ago, when the first Africans were brought here enslaved, we've been in search of this new frontier, of this place where we could truly become a more just and a more perfect union. A new frontier, I think, speaks to the fact that we know that talent and intellect are universal, but resources, opportunities are not. A new frontier speaks to the fact that we know as a country we shouldn't be locking up kids in cages and separating them from their parents. A new frontier. The new frontier speaks to the work of the Parkland student activists. Young people who transform tragedy to triumph and are pushing our nation to understand that it's not natural for one of the leading cause of death of young people, particularly young men of color, to be gun violence, that doesn't have to be that way, that it's truly time for a new frontier. A new frontier speaks to the fact that in 2019, in the greatest nation on this country, there's no more room for misogyny, for transphobia, for homophobia, for white supremacy, for racism. And the new frontier challenges us to be bold and not incremental, to think about going to the moon, both literally and figuratively, because I think the work we have to do to combat climate change, the work we have to do to welcome folks to our country, to build bridges and not walls, the work we have to do will require a new audaciousness and truly a new frontier. And I think that's why we're here today, and that's the challenge before us, to understand that there's nothing different between me and you, there's nothing different than the great Parkland activists between you guys and them, that we're all the same people, we're all called at this time to do what we can to make the new frontier more than just rhetoric, but real, in real world. So I'll conclude with a story, not a story, it's a story I'm a part of, so it's a real thing that happened. It happened 9 years ago. I was on the Freedom Rides with some of the original Freedom Riders, and we went through like all the spots, and they stopped on the Freedom Tour. And one guy, his name was Bob Singleton. He was 21 at the time. He was a senior at UCLA. He looked at me and he said, "Michael, I was arrested on August 4th, 1961. And then he said, "Why is that day important?" And I said, "Well, you were arrested. If you weren't arrested, we wouldn't be on this bus. Like all the freedoms and rights I enjoy, I wouldn't have." And he rolled his eyes and he said, "On that day, Barack Obama was born." And then he said he had no idea that the choice he made as a 21-year-old to think bold, to be bold, to dream of a new frontier, a new paradigm, a new, more just country, the choice he made on that day would pave the way so a child born on that same day with no opportunity would have the chance to be president. And then he looked at me and said, "What are you prepared to do today so that 50 years from now, a child born has more opportunity than you have?" He said, "Don't celebrate me. Don't think I'm better than you. Don't spend too much time is that a word, mytholo? Making a myth of me. He said, but think about what is that you can do as an individual so that 50 years from now, a child born has more opportunity. And I think that's the question before us now, and that's the question that President Kennedy laid out for us when he spoke about this idea of a new frontier. In Stockton, we're making progress. We have a lot of work to do. This last year, we had a 40% reduction in homicides, but even one homicide is too many. This May, we're preparing to give every graduating senior from our largest school district a guaranteed scholarship, either $1,000 a year for 4 years to go to a four-year school, $500 a year for 2 years to go to a trade school, or $500 for 2 years to go to community college, but there's still much more work to do. So again, I think the question before us now, as we reflect on where our country is, as we reflect as to where our country should be, and as we reflect that our country won't get to where it needs to be without our works and without our sacrifice, is really what are we prepared to do collectively, but also more importantly, what are we prepared to do individually today, tomorrow, next week, so that 50 years from now, a child born today is actually born in a new frontier, a country with true liberty and justice for all. Thank you.